Today is April 19th, 2013. I am interviewing Edward Thomas Dore at his home in Winsted, Connecticut. The interviewer is Buckley W. Morgan II, working with Central Connecticut State University. Tom, can you please state your full name, date of birth, city and state in which you live?
My full name is Edward Thomas Dore III. I prefer to be called Tom. I was born in Torrington, Connecticut, and grew up in Litchfield, Connecticut, and has never fallen very far from the tree. So here I am in Winsted now.
Okay, and which war did you serve?
I was in Vietnam.
Okay, and what was your branch of service?
I was in the United States Marine Corps.
And your highest rank that you would achieve in service?
I was discharged as a Sergeant E5.
Okay. Now, in what general locations did you serve, or what started your enlistment?
The enlistment story I think was interesting because it was a very important part of my family history. When I graduated from high school in '64, and in '60 I started college and didn't do very well and withdrew. And the draft board got wind of me very quickly, and got a letter that I was being drafted, and took it quite seriously. It wasn't a question of where or when or at that time. I hadn't heard of any protesting about not going. That just didn't come to it wasn't in my field of knowledge. I just hadn't heard of it, and it would be almost unthinkable because of my family history, where my grandfather was killed in World War I, my father was wounded in World War II, my mother was a lieutenant in the Second World War, and we spent every Memorial Day of my childhood running around graves in Litchfield, various cemeteries, east, west, and all, putting flags on veterans' graves. And it was service was a huge thing in my family. It was we were Irish Catholics on the east side of Litchfield. My great-great-grandfather, forefathers ago, that many four is the number, had come over from Ireland and started working in Connecticut, and brought the rest of the family with him. And outside of the Irish tradition, which was Roman Catholic and very devout and very, there were the rules, the Catholic rules that you followed. There was also this background of that people who had served in the military was a huge responsibility, and that if your turn came up, if you were called, you went. There wasn't any question as to why or what would happen to me. It was at the time in '65 when I got my draft notice. It was really clear that a draft notice was a ticket to the Fort Dix in the Army, and after 8 or 12 weeks, you were on a plane to Saigon, and the news at the time was not very good. And we used to watch it on TV every night. Used to count bodies and stuff. It's funny how they measured war then. But I knew there was something awful going on. I also didn't know there was any opposition to it at all. I was an Irish Catholic, naive young guy, didn't know very much. So when I got my draft notice, I went down to the post office where all the service recruiters were stationed, and I talked to the Navy guy, and he told me there was a 2-year wait to get in the Navy, and I had 4 months before I had to report for my draft. There was a 4-year wait to get in the Coast Guard. The Army, there was no question about, they were ready to take me, but it was pretty well understood there would be a a ticket to Saigon. And the Marine Corps said, well, listen, what we can do is if you give us 4 years, we'll put you in the Air Wing. I said, well, you still be an infantryman, but we'll also teach you this additional craft so you can. We have airplanes, they said, we just don't, we run around a lot, but we fly around a lot. I had never heard about that, and it seemed like a better deal than running around a lot. So I think it was in March of '66, I went to Parris Island. The man said, I'll never forget his name. He was right. It was Staff Sergeant Davis, drill instructor, motherfucker. It was hard. The hardest 3 months of my life, I think. But he weaned. He changed us. And I remember kind of like some people couldn't. There are all sort of strategies of trying to get out, and there was just no room for that. There was no. It was. I'm not tolerated. Any. So we were given the suicide briefing that if you wanted to do it, you don't do it this way. You do it, this way. And if you run away, Parris Island was in the middle of. Well, I don't know if it's true or not. These huge swamps, and no one ever was found. They didn't bother to look for you. There was no way off the island except on the bus. And it was pretty clear that you had to finish. It was real horrible. A couple members of my platoon attempted suicide. I didn't quite understand why. And then there was this huge kind of like love of killing, there was this sort of like indoctrination into kind of being, but we were just taken apart. I don't know how to describe it.
Broken down and built back up.
Broken down, yeah, and then they put us back together, and when they were done, I was proud they had finished. It was, and so when my completion of Parris Island happened, they had a ceremony, and I sent word up north to my parents, and my father and my brother flew down, much to my amazement, It was one of those, like, 45-minute ceremonies. You march by, and now they give you a picture, and, and then you shake your parents' hand, and then you have to, they get back on the airplane, and you get on the truck to Lejeune, but it was very very striking to see people change. And I was when I was done with boot camp, I was a grunt. Went to Lejeune for 3 months, and I don't know, we just ran around, war games, I don't know what they called them. We were, running and carrying stuff and live fire exercises, and everyone was a grunt, And I remember after six months or so, the time came for the training was ending. And the day I remember clearly, they were passing out orders, and there was Republic of Vietnam, and I had signed up on the condition that I would butt this airplane thing, which I was kind of like, I didn't know about what was going to happen, but they told me there were airplanes involved, So lots of people in the platoon, I'd say like almost 90%. Were on the next, they were in 30 days, they were going to go to Vietnam, and I was going to go to Jacksonville, Florida, I was going to be made an aircraft electrician. I kind of remember bidding everyone farewell, and like we parted company. When I was in Jacksonville, we were in school for 3 months. I didn't understand anything about what we were doing. It was about electricity, which has always been a mystery to me. And then I was sent up. There was a Air Force, a Marine base, air base just outside of Beaufort. I was sent to, and I got to work on F-4B Phantoms for a while. Kind of very exciting. There was this thing that happened. I had a friend at the time. His name was Murphy, and he was one of the few people that I got to know pretty well. And unfortunately, one night walking back from Beaufort to the airbase, he was struck and run down by a car. And people that knew him, he grew up nearby. So we all went to his funeral, and got dressed up in our uniforms and the like, and took a bus and went down there and went to his funeral. And the appalling incident was, I was very sad for Murphy because, he was taken really early. But he had this, there was like 5 or 6 women at the funeral who were very good looking and very young. And I didn't know this about the Marine Corps at the time and about men in general, but the funeral was hardly over, and before the men were starting to hit on the women, and the women were responding. And it turned into I was appalled by what had happened, and that I didn't know that about men, that they could be like that, that they would, they would party in the one part of the graveyard and the funeral in this part, and I didn't get it. I just didn't quite get it. There was something really fractured going on, and I just didn't quite understand who these people were anymore. And I knew when I got back that I needed to get out of there. There was no place to go. You just can't go where you want. So I volunteered to go to Vietnam. The request was quickly, of course, granted, and in December of '66, I think it was, I headed west, and I went from, what I remember is being in Okinawa, and just being terribly bored. I was there for 2-3 weeks, and there was nothing happening, and waiting. We were just waiting and waiting, and there were people in another part of the camp that was very sullen, and these were the people that were coming back, and we were kept separate from them. It was probably a good thing. So finally one day the boredom ended. We got on an air jet, and I flew into Da Nang, and I was real surprised. It was a concrete runway, and wow, it's kind of like, and I was up front. I was one of the first people off, and when the door opened, the immense heat was the first thing that struck me. The second was, I looked off to the right, and there were the people who had been there done their tour of duty, and were waiting to get on the airplane I was getting off of. And I'd never seen anything like it. They had they had ears, or they had all this stuff, and they were saying stuff that I had never heard before, or could imagine. They looked like they'd been way over the edge, no one looked sane, they're all kind of like, I don't know. They were very vocal and very kind of like unkept, and they were. I don't know. They were. I don't know. In the later on, you would see how Rambo kind of looked. Kind of like, or somebody else. They all kind of looked that way. Kind of like something had happened. And as I stepped off the airplane, there was another airplane, and underneath it was this pile of black bags, and they were body bags. There were like 60 of them, and I was kind of like, I was completely blown. I knew what it was, and I was just kind of like, I remember walking across the tarmac, and I knew I don't know, something very different was happening to me, and I found it really, it was real hard. I didn't know I was having coping, like my coping skills were taking a hike, Well, anyways, I sent down to Chulai, which is about 30 miles south of Da Nang, and very first night I was there, I was issued all the stuff we were given, and they sent us out on it was like Christmas Eve or something in '66, right? And so Christmas Eve '66, that was my first. That was our first kind of like official night in the place where I was supposed to be, and I was out walking the perimeter, and I was in this hole with this African American kid who couldn't stay awake, and we were told, kind of like this, free. It was a friendly, anything moved, you shot, It's a real foggy night, and cold and wet, and I had to stay awake because the other guy would stay. It was just kind of like really weird, The beginning, I should have known that in the beginning it was sort of like something was really wrong here. I said there's something really wrong. We lived in tents that were in holes, kind of filled up with water, and it was just kind of like we're always wet. And they were building little wooden houses at the time, and they were supposed to move into huts or whatever. I don't know what you call them. And I was wondering whatever happened to being the airplane thing, and I noticed it was that it was, of course, it was an air base, and it was a very huge, sprawling air base. Chulai was very huge. And I noticed that there was an airplane down there. There was I don't know, there was a guy, somehow, you just happened to be in the right place at the right time. There was a guy who was a crew chief that was leaving, and they needed someone to replace him. And I just stood up, I said, that's me. And I knew I wanted that, and I just made sure that I was the one that was chosen to be a member of the flight crew. And then it all changed. I was sort of like, started reading, started doing the stuff I would do to get ready to earn my crew chief wings and all that, and Ted happened. It was a crazy, crazy, crazy thing. was an unbelievable sort of like, everyone was, I don't know, we were under fire, things were blowing up all over the place. All we knew was what we knew, in July we were taking all kinds of fire, and that was only a little bit of the story, come to find out. I never knew what the whole story was. But before, we were down the perimeter, kind of engaged in firefights and making sure that that there was no breach, and ammo dumps were blowing up, and it was just kind of like, it was just a very confusing, awkward, terrible time. People got killed, and it was hard to. It was real hard to see. It was hard to know who we were. I don't know. It was real hard to see who it was. I don't know. It was hard to figure out who the enemy was. I couldn't quite ever get a handle on that. It was this who to trust, who not to trust. So the default position was trust no one. There's a after Tet, I sort of like figured out, I did not understand what was going on. I knew that I was the wrong person in the wrong place. I had entirely landed in the wrong part of the world or something. Something was really wrong. And so I remember going to the sick bay and saying, this is just not, I'm in the wrong place. And they said, sure. So I asked to kind of like, I was pretty insistent about it, and they said, well, you can go talk to they had an evaluation group, chaplain or something, whatever it was. And I told them about, how I was, pretty innocent, and, well, it was a line of people who all had the same complaint, and it was the old catch-22, which, if I thought I was losing my mind, and that was pretty much what we were supposed to happen, So being unable to kind of get out, I was sort of realized there was nothing to do but to just do it. What the doing meant was, during the day we used to, we were as a crew chief on a DC-3, and we used to fly troops around I-Corps, and it was from everywhere from the DMZ to Dong Ha to Wei. We used to land in the most improbable places. Da Nang, Chulai. We spent most of our time Chulai North, and then at night we were a flare ship, and we used to work in tandem with, it was an Air Force plane, used to have machine guns on the side. It would tilt itself at an angle and, blanket the area with bullets. Puff, used to call it, I think. And we were the lamplighter. We used to check out flares, and so many nights we were kind of we were the light for the guys on the ground, and it was real rewarding to be a part of that. We made a huge difference, I think, after Tet, when things tried to cut. There was a move to try to kind of push back, and we used to catch the whole companies of North Vietnamese in the open. We got shot at. All kinds of rockets would go flying by us, and all this stuff, and it was just kind of an amazing sort of like wild time to be kind of there. It was It's a blur mostly to me now. But I knew that every third night I have to walk perimeter, and that was everyone was. I don't know. That was just part of the routine. So it was like twice a week, or every 10, well, I don't know, every third or fourth day I'd have to go out and do perimeter and go out and patrol, and that was part of the deal. And then the other days I would fly. Um, I wasn't. I used to sit in the co-pilot seat, and I handled the throttle settings and the flaps, and every once in a while they would let me fly, and I would handle boarding, and I would handle, at night it was loading the flares and training people how to use them, and making sure people threw them out of the airplane in the right way, and I got real good at it. Um, um, but slowly over time, there was this sort of like, I don't know exactly what happened. It was partly between, I don't know, between the firefights, on the ground, and then watching the firefights from the air, and seeing people get hurt. We used to do body runs, we used to carry people to Da Nang who were deceased. And it was particularly horrific. There were many times I just couldn't believe what was going on. It was it ranged from, we were the plane that gave Bob Hope a ride down from, where was he, Da Nang. He gave him a ride down to Chulai, and it was just after I'd been there a year, and he gave a performance. And the most astonishing looking women with him. So it went from range from that to kind of like to having a plane full of dead soldiers, carrying the two graves and registration, to carting the new guys, back to replace the dead guys, to kind of going out, on, walking the perimeter and doing, our part for, maintaining the security of Chulai. We just kind of I don't know, there was something cracked. I got real good at it, the year 13 months was a long time, and when my 13 months came up, I knew I just could not go back to the States. Couldn't do that. I don't know how to say I didn't belong, but I didn't belong. And I knew that. It was the way I looked, the way I dressed. I kind of looked like the guys who I changed into the guys I changed into them,
The guys you seen when you was getting off the plane when you initially arrived.
Yeah, I turned into one of them. I was kind of like, I wasn't a Rambo kind of guy. I was mean. We used to drink a lot too. I mean, that's, wherever we were, the last flight of the night, or I don't know, there was always beer. There was always, I don't know why the military made sure there was always plenty of beer, And it was the most horrific tasting beer I've ever had. I don't know, Valentine's something, I don't know what it was. It was warm and terrible. But numbed you out a little bit, so you could sleep. So I ended up spending another year there. So I was in country 2 years. And then they told me I had to go home. I refused. I just didn't know I couldn't refuse. I would have to sign up, for another 4 more years in the Marine Corps, and I was at almost 4 years by that time, and I spent 2 years in Vietnam and kind of I'd seen a little bit of everything and been part of most everything that happened there during 68, 69, and I was pretty hardened and but pretty uncivilized. Coming back, I remember landing in California, and I just got this overwhelming kind of like anxiety. I don't know, angst set in or whatever it was. But I knew I didn't belong there, and I refused to get off the airplane. But then they knocked me out and carried me off. But I didn't get off. So I left this chunk of myself there. And it's still there. And
were there casualties within your own unit?
Yes. That was especially during TEP. We had lots of people were wounded, and we were completely unprepared for it. Took everyone by surprise. It was I don't know. There was a sort of cavalier sort of attitude before TEP about some people out there, Well, when TEP came, people died. People died. And then it just kind of got ugly, there were casualties that were kind of like came from enemy fire, and then there were casualties that came from people doing themselves in. And the time I was leaving, there was if you were a rank E6 or above, you had to worry about being fragged. People were going around. There was something going on in the ranks that they wasn't unheard of. That gunny sergeants, who were gung ho, didn't their sleeping quarters were a grenade rolled underneath them, and they were. I just couldn't believe what was going on, It was just sort of like, I don't know, nothing. Well, nothing to be proud of. I suppose that was the thing that meant the most to me afterwards, is that the whole experience meant nothing. It was just a mess. People were terrible. Lots of people died. We were ruthlessly cruel to the Vietnamese. Terribly hooked on drugs. either alcohol or they used to sell. They didn't sell, but used to see cigarette packs, and they morphine, I guess it was heroin, morphine used to come dressed up in cigarettes. There were people kind of terribly stoned. And there was a part of me that I thought, well, never. I didn't do the stone part. I certainly did the drinking part. But I saw the people who did drugs just were. They didn't last very long. They were oblivious. And it was just too much of a. I don't know. It was just. The way you survived was to keep your wits about you. And had your lucky days. Had your lucky days.
Okay, this is going to end part 1 of this interview. Okay, we're here with Edward Thomas Dore. This is segment number 2. So, Tom, were you awarded any medals or citations? Do you remember what ones you were awarded?
I was. I won it. 5 air medals. 5 air medals. Navy achievement. I was for being a crew chief. And then all the others, there's probably 3 rows, but I never collected them. I came back Vietnam, and there was I couldn't wait to get out, so I didn't ask for my good conduct medal or anything like that, so I was just ushered out. The air medal came in the mail. So did the Navy achievement. They were all with combat Bs.
And did you sustain any injuries while you were in country or during your service?
No, I was really fortunate. Anyways, I survived a couple plane crashes. Was shot down.
Want to discuss those?
Not very much. One was I'll talk briefly about we were ferrying some new people from Da Nang to Chu Lai. Green, very green, just sort of like they look clean and sparkling and all that, And we're on final and into Chu Lai, and we took a bullet and a fire in one of our engines, and we had to put down real hard and off the runway a little bit. And I remember looking back and seeing people and the look on their faces. I was, I'm no one responsible for for getting people out now, and I was kind of trying to assess the situation about what's going on with the airplane and what's going on with the people back in the airplane. And I'll never forget their, it was sort of funny, but it was the way they looked and screamed, and it was, and I was kind of like, well, this is just kind of like, this is not going well right now. Well, I was pretty sure the airplane was going to stop. It was going to be okay. I thought, seemed anyways. And when it did stop, I just did what I had to do. I kind of went back and, took people out of there. I was very methodical. I made sure people wore seatbelts, and I was able to save a bunch of lives that day. But I had to undo them and kind of throw most of the people off the airplane.
Well, Quite the welcome to Vietnam.
Yeah, it was welcome to Vietnam. That was kind of like, it was like, welcome to Vietnam, guys, you know. This is the way it begins.
Well, Tom, how did you stay in touch with your family?
It was mostly by letter. Um, and then they had this phenomena of R&R. God knows. So I went to Hong Kong and called. And then my second tour was in Sydney and called. So 2 phone calls. Some of the missions we flew were a little west of Vietnam. We didn't talk about those very much, but we were in some places that even I didn't know the name to. But they were very, very, very happy to see us. I don't, God knows why. I didn't call from there. There weren't phones. Kind of CIA kind of stuff. I don't know. See, I built all kinds of these little airports all over Cambodia, Thailand, you know, kind of stuff. It was sort of like, you know, Air America. That was kind of their. They were kind of like, you had to bring things to them every once in a while, you know, people, things, those. And of course, we always spent the night because it was out of country, you know. It was sort of like, shit. And places were always populated with bars and the typical kind of like, God, I dare say it, how the war brings out the worst in people. Why, you know, between the way the way the women of Thailand and the whole Far East were treated, and that I was part of that, you know. It's been an enduring kind of like, you wouldn't believe it. You might believe it, but I dare not tell the story of how bad it could be, and the trafficking and all that of sex and you know, making sure that the troops were, I don't know. It was awful. There was a dark side to the war. You know, there was sort of like, you know, drugs and women and violence. It was just, it was just horrible. I couldn't call home and say that I didn't dare. I couldn't, you know, I was an Irish Catholic kind of you know, I was breaking all the rules, you know. So there was very little communication. An occasional letter. That'd be about it, yeah.
Did you have enough supplies? Was there ever an issue with supplies, getting the supplies you needed? Or?
One thing there was never a shortage of was beer. Yeah. Was always the last. It was the last load of the day came was the beer. But something about the food I couldn't eat. I was too nervous to eat in front of other people. I don't quite know what that was about, but I used to have to eat alone. And to do that, I lived off of sea rations. Beans and hot dogs. Cold, didn't matter. As long as I didn't have to go to the mess tent. there's something, I just didn't want to know people even that way. You know, I just didn't want to have dinner with anybody. You know, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. You know, I don't know. It's like, ever since my first experience with my friend who was killed and the funeral and Marines in general and how ugly they could be, they weren't the kind of people I liked. You know, I just didn't like them at all. They were mean, ruthless, drunken, like womanizing. It was just like, and they had this code of honor. I don't know where the honor was in that. They could be exceptionally brave. That is for sure. And they cleaned up nice. And sure, they did some, you know, we did some astonishingly good things. It was a hopeless cause, though. I mean, that became clear to us as time went on, that there was no winning. It was just losing. And more losing. And the key was not to get caught up in being lost in the losing. If you know what I mean. I don't think you can get lost yourself, because it didn't matter if you lived or died. I mean, it didn't matter. Everyone got, cavalier would be the wrong word. It was kind of the indifference you get when you're drunk. But you weren't drunk, you know. You were kind of like, it was that was the indifference. I don't know how to describe it, but it was sort of like, I don't know.
Inhibition.
There's very little care. I don't know, not care. I would not characterize it as a band of brothers. You know what I mean? It wasn't that at all. People would come and go. You know, they're always kind of like people coming and going. Tours of duty were up. You know, kind of like there was always this shuffling going on. You know, new people we couldn't trust, and old people who don't want to take too many risks anymore. You know. And then there were the people in between who said, well, you can go ahead. You know.
I remember you said you flew Bob Hope in. Did you see any USO shows?
I never went to one. I was afraid of large groups. I thought it was a target. I would stay away from congregations of. It seemed like a target, like you were setting yourself up for a target. I knew people that carried that to extreme. I knew some people who lived underground for the whole tour. They would come up and do what they had to do, then they would go back. They had to dug. Oh my, it was unbelievable. They lived underground. They were like moles. They lived in bunkers, like way down and way underneath, you know, down deep, you know. It was like one out of. There's a couple in every platoon, you know. It kind of they just dug real deep down. A lot of excessive sandbagging, you know, kind of like, and they were pretty. They never came out, you know. Kind of they were. I don't know. It was strange, you know.
Definitely wanted to preserve their life.
They did, but it was. I don't know. they were weird. You know, they were the wrong color. They had this strange they had this strange look to them. I just never trusted them. Anyone that worried, um, I I knew wouldn't would I knew wouldn't I didn't want them to be my backup. You know what I mean? I don't want them at my side. You know, I knew who to be with. You know, I knew who the good guys were and who would stick with you too, pretty much. There was a band. There was a band of people that I know, guys that I got relatively close with.
Well, what did you think? What did you think of the officers? Were they pretty much the same characterization as the enlisted, or did you see them actually in a little bit different light?
Well, the the most dangerous person in the field was the first lieutenant. I think their life expectancy was something like 8 weeks or something. I don't know. It was, you know. So you saw you saw a lieutenant coming, you know, especially if they were green. You know, he would say go across, or you know, 2 clicks out, you know, and you know you go out half a click and find a safe place, you know. You know, they had there was clear there was a it was clear to me that they lived a different life than us. I never did quite understand that military hierarchy, you know, like what it is that they knew that I didn't. That I don't know, and I never quite got that. I still have a problem with authority like that. It was pretty alien. I knew someone had to be in charge, but they all seemed pretty young to me.
So, what did you? We're gonna move on to after they knocked you out, got you off the plane.
Yep.
And what were the weeks like after that? What was your life like? Where did you go? Did you come back home to Connecticut? Or?
I did. I came, and I knew that I had time on my hands that I would. Having time on my hands was not a good thing because I think like everyone who. I mean, as soon as I got off the airplane, I started drinking. You know. So I went to the community college. It was something very different about me, but I couldn't tell. I didn't tell anyone where I'd been and what I'd done. I ended up studying math and philosophy. So that's pretty far away from the battlefield. But as far as you could get, I was spent 2 years down here in Northwest, and I went up to Colby, and I think I was with one of their first Vietnam veterans there, and I think that's why they gave me a scholarship, you know, and said come on up, and I did, and I had a welcoming experience up there. It was very nice. Very nice.
What did you study up there? The same?
Philosophy. Yeah. It was from from July to the campus was sort of like, or the quad, from July to the quad, the square in the center of the campus,
Two different worlds.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I just could not believe what had happened and what I was doing, and how odd I felt and how meaningless the whole thing had been, and that it wasn't until it was about 10 years ago I went to the VA, and I told them about some of the things that I had seen. Someone suggested that I go to the VA, and so I don't know. I was going through a divorce. It was real hard, and so I did that, and they gave me a disability for PTSD, and I was like, oh. I knew I'd been carrying something around for a long time. I just never knew how to name it. So it's, it was a long time before I never, most of my adult life was spent knowing something was really wrong, but, and that I was hyper-reactive and a little hyperactive and a little too vigilant and just a little kind of like too much on edge, I knew it was something. I just didn't know what it was you did about it, between the dreams, the flashbacks that I've experienced. I don't know what to call them exactly, but it seemed like the experience was just yesterday, Get lost in time and space kind of feeling. So I mean, it was all very difficult. Nothing came easy. I ended up being a sign language interpreter, where I'd carry messages from one group to another. Yeah, that sort of seemed to fit. It didn't matter that I was there. I was just real good at carrying messages from one group to the other, being neither the message nor the messenger. I was sort of fit into kind of like who I had become. Something between people that I could understand a lot, and I knew, I was a pretty smart guy, I thought, and I could make the two worlds, work, but I would belong to neither. And that was kind of like, that's a huge theme in my post-Vietnam, being but not belonging to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then they send me a check every month for being candid one day about it, which is nice.
Oh, you're talking the
VA, yeah. Beyond that, I don't associate with any veterans causes at all, hardly. It wasn't until, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago that I would actually walk in a parade publicly and said I was from Vietnam. So it's been a long trip to get here. Um, um,
Have you held I know you mentioned the sign language interpretation. Have you held any long-term career since Vietnam to today?
that was I.
That was it?
That was it. I was. Yeah, I did that for like 25 years, 20 years, and then I became a. When the internet was new, that between thing. I was real good at that. Um, and then I learned how to. So I did that for. I was a guru for a while, and then when that fell away and people started getting smart about it, I learned how to manage a high and low ropes course in small groups. So, I mean, my talent lies in carrying messages, making sure one group understands the other group. One of my talents is being able to do that. Um, um, yeah.
Well, Tom, I don't really have any other questions. You actually, on your own, pretty much went through everything that I would have probably asked. Um, just let me ask: is there anything else that you want to discuss? Anything that's you haven't covered yet, or that you feel is important to say?
Just that the experience of horror changes you, um, and it's usually not for the better. Um, and I'm proud of myself for surviving and thriving, in spite of that. And maybe it'd be because of it. I don't know. But I worry about the young generations that have spent the past 12 years, 4 or 5 tours. I don't know. In that kind of doing combat and different kind of combat. Mostly things blowing up on you, not getting shot at so much. Uh, um, but war changes people in ways that um, somehow I think that we need to find a way to kind of make sure that we find ways to take that wounded warrior and make sure that there's some mechanism or something that turns him into, or him and her into a person that belongs again. And that's always seemed to be absent. And I would want that to be something that that's the kind of thing I think that needs to happen, and which is not.
All right, Tom. Well, thank you. I want to thank you for your service and for letting me come into your house and talk about something that I know you haven't talked to anybody about really.